All right, welcome everybody to another author chat on SFF Addicts. And today I have the pleasure of chatting with Luke Arnold. He's an actor and fantasy author. As the former, he performed the role of Long John Silver in the Starz series Black Sails and is featured in numerous other television shows and films. And as an author, he has penned 3 books in the Fetch Phillips Archives, including The Last Smile in Sunder City, which I have right here. Love these covers, they are fantastic, as well as book number 2, Dead Man in a Ditch, and book 3, One Foot in the Fade, which is out today, April 26th. So congratulations on the new release, Luke, and welcome to the show. How you doing?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Yeah, I mean, first off, how are you feeling about the launch of book 3?
Yeah, I'm really excited. It was kind of funny because the first two came out both in 2020, which was
Mhm.
not really the ideal year to be a debut author, but and especially with 2 books at once. But it was kind of
Yeah.
fun to have them out right on the back of each other, and it did kind of give it a nice little momentum, and felt like they kind of landed there together in a really fun way. And then it's been a little bit of a break, so it's nice to have a new Fetch story coming out into the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. Although 2020, I think a lot of people got back into reading in a big way, so it might have been a good boon for you to get in there.
Yeah, it is interesting because I think a lot of people did get back into reading, but I feel mostly what everyone did was like, on first week of lockdown, just ordered Infinite Jest and Moby Dick and all these books that they intended to read. Where, as a new author, you
Not
kind of rely.
fantasy detective fiction, forget about that.
Well, not new stuff, I guess. It's that kind of thing. I think a lot of, and look, this is all, it all still feels very new to me. But that
Mhm.
thing of like being a new author often relies a lot on, going into bookstores and meeting people face to face, doing events, and so it was interesting. It's funny as a debut author coming in, and you're waiting for people to tell you like, "Hey, this is how things work. This is what we usually do," and instead everyone's going like, "We have no idea what we're doing anymore." It's like when
Shit's a mess,
everything's been
man.
thrown out. That's it. Shit's in the fan. So I don't know if you've got any ideas. And so I think everyone was kind of scrambling to go like, "All right,
Yeah.
all the festivals are moving online." Um, Trying to social media has to play a bigger part of it, and so
Mhm.
yeah, it well, I think definitely people were reading a little bit more, but it did create some other issues. But the fun thing about books is it's not like a movie's opening weekend or something. You get to kind of put them out in the world, and people will find them, and if they like them, they'll tell other people. So it has a longer evolution, I think.
Yeah, it's like a more of a slow burn, but it feels more natural in a way.
Yeah.
Whereas movies and I guess TV shows are on a similar wavelength to books, but like a film would be like, we're gonna force this down your throat because we have to make money at the box office as soon as we can.
Yeah, that's it. It's all about that opening weekend with
Yeah.
films, and saying that you rely so much. It's amazing with TV shows that so much of the like reviews are based on the first couple of episodes, which
Yeah.
and so I'm sure when you're making something, you're always going like, okay, yeah, we want to have a nice natural lead in, we want to build the story, but you're like, but if that pilot isn't great, then our Rotten Tomato score is ruined forever, and and
Exactly.
then who cares what we do? So
Like,
yeah, there's something natural, more natural, and maybe a bit fair about the way it works with books.
yeah, and we'll jump into a bit of your acting as well as the Fetch Phillips archives. But first, this is a question I like to ask my guests right off the bat to sort of ease into things and get to know you a bit more. But what was your relationship like with SFF and reading growing up?
I read a lot growing up, and I think I was always drawn, and always and have been drawn to things. Maybe it wasn't always a lot of full SFF stuff, but always things with a bit of magic realism or some element of that in there. Like I was a big reader when I was little, and but it would have been all the typical, you know, went through a big Goosebumps phase, or whatever at primary school and that kind of stuff, and yeah, and so and then lots of comic books as well. I think my first ambitions, like when I was young, was to write and draw comics. Was my first kind of and first kind of things I was writing and creating. So that's kind of where it all began. And it's funny, I kind of dedicate the first book to my dad for introducing me to the Raymond Chandler detective stories and to Tolkien, because he did. I vividly remember him kind of reading me Lord of the Rings, like as a bedtime story for a period of time, and we never got through it. It kind of like we got to it a bit. At a certain point, it kind of
I
other
mean, it's
things took
really
over.
long.
It's really long, but even the beginning of that idea, and I think that would have been, it's that great period as you start to when you're a kid and you're watching your own stuff, and then when you get to start experiencing things that your parents like. And I think my dad was a real influence of going, hey, like let's go watch the black and white Zorro movies, or and find some of those other things. So it kind of just in there, it definitely was dropped in as one of those early influences of as I was getting out of, I guess, kids books into finding out what else films, books, and things were out there. And then but then I do think I'd say as things went on, I probably read a bit less and less sci-fi fantasy as I was growing up. And like I'd go back and dabble. I read some Discworld stuff early on. I think I probably played the video games of that first, like the Discworld point and click adventures,
I
and
didn't even know there were
then
any Discworld point and click
yeah.
adventures.
So there's
Dude, that sounds
two.
awesome.
I think the first two they're on PC, but also I think I played the first one on PlayStation One. And Eric Idle does the voice of Rincewind, I'm pretty sure, and so there's a kind of Python-esque energy to the whole thing, which obviously matches
That's very,
quite
very
well.
fitting for
Yeah,
Terry Pratchett, though.
yeah, it's really quite cool. So that I think I got a lot of that in like that introduction there, and and I probably dropped over to Discworld from that stuff. And I do think video games is probably where I was digesting a lot of sci-fi fantasy. Like, there are themes in a lot of stuff, but when I went back and played the um, remake of Final Fantasy VII when that came out a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, I really took a lot. Like I think there's more of that stuff in Sunder City than I think I first realized.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's lots of those themes, but there was it was like that. I think was a big fantasy influence that came in probably when I was starting to when I was in high school and starting to write more stuff. So yeah, and then it really so it means I've had to play catch up a lot. I think suddenly and in my mind when I first started writing the short story that this would all be based on. Yeah, I was more thinking about like I was going back and reading the Raymond Chandler detective stories and some of those other classic like the Dashiell Hammett stuff more than I was going back to fantasy. I think, and then it was
Hmm.
when Orbit picked it up and was like, "Hey, you're a fantasy author now," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah," and you've got this new cohort. I was like, "Well, okay, I've really got to go back and read some stuff." So I have over the last couple of years been playing a lot of catch up from how familiar I was with the genre and where it had kind of
Yeah.
gone in recent years than I was before.
That's kind of nice, though. It's like you get this resurgence just based on the fact that you are creatively putting out like fantasy stuff. And it's kind of like, shit, that kind of forced my hand. I got to catch up and see what's out there and
That's right. And
get
it's a
back
really
into it.
interesting time to do it as well, I think. Like
Yeah.
because I wasn't like a big fantasy head growing up, it's not like I got there's this whole I guess real shift that's been happening and it's always been there. But it becoming more into focus where it's not just a very I guess white European male view of fantasy that that kind of that held so much of the genre before, and now things are breaking out. Like for me, I've done most of my reading recently, and so I kind of and it's like wow, there's so many different ways of exploring these fantasy and sci-fi elements. Um, and so then it's like, oh, cool, I'll go back and pick up some of those classics. But it yeah, it does seem a really great time now to get into sci-fi fantasy because there's a lot more diverse, interesting, different voices coming to the forefront as
Hmm.
than there maybe were in decades before.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's a good time. This is like the golden age from my perspective of sci-fi and fantasy, you know?
Yeah,
So people say like, oh, the golden age is back in like the seven. No, 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 no. Not,
yeah. No,
not right now. Right now. We are
that's it.
living
There's
it.
so many places to go now, like so many things to pick up where you're like, yeah. And I think that because I think that was actually, and look, there'll always be derivative stuff, and there was always
Yeah.
other things out there if you had a means to go find it that maybe weren't rising to the top, as far as the word of mouth or getting put on bookstores before the internet existed. Um, but. Yeah, I do think I dabbled a few times in maybe after reading certain comics or watching shows. I never played Dungeons and Dragons growing up, but I remember seeing like the Saturday morning cartoon and going like, "Oh, this I find this
Mhm.
kind of interesting," and that led me to pick up some fantasy books. I think around that time, ones I wouldn't even remember, but those ones that just felt like that's so much derivative from that world where there's almost a level of assumed knowledge and like I was like, hey, you're just going to open the first page. We're going to hit you with 50 different made up words of different names and places. And I was just like, oh, this doesn't really do it for me at all.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of those experiences early on meant that I maybe didn't read some of those classics when I could have, because I was just like, they felt a little bit
Jargon
impenetrable. Yeah,
overload, man. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. And obviously you mentioned that you were writing a bit in high school and then you wrote the short story that eventually became Fetch Phillips, but between all of this you became a professional actor and you've been acting for many years. At which point did you're reading so many scripts? I imagine that took up a lot of your reading time for sure. But when did you decide you wanted to, really diversify your creativity and put more effort into writing fantasy, writing Fetch Phillips short story, and all that?
Yeah, so I guess until my acting career took off, well, like at school, it was all kind of the same. I was just involved in anything creative. And then when I was working out where to go do university or like, I was deciding like, okay, am I going to go to acting school? Am I going to go to film school? Am I going to do a writing course? And I'd done a job in the film industry already, which meant that I kind of it put some money in my bank account, and I kind of had this my gap year when I mostly worked, but then was able to sit and prepare for all those things. So I got into a course of each kind, and something just felt like I think acting might be the like I think I might become a I kind of had a sense that I become a better maybe writer and filmmaker through life experience and doing other things.
Hmm.
And we're getting in like being an actor in my 20s felt like the good thing is it's also quite communal as well. Like there's something about going like, okay, the other one's going to require a lot of time sitting in a room on my own and being self-disciplined, which acting does require more of that than people think as well. Like most
Yeah.
of the work is done on your own in a room going over the script, and kind of what you do with everyone else is gravy. But it is a more, especially going to drama school, a much more collaborative, explorative, vibrant place than maybe the other courses would have been, and it just felt right at that time. And then you're right, and so still through that time, I'd make some of my own stuff, would still do a bit of writing, but it's different when you always know that if the call comes to go do an acting job, I'm going to take it. And so it's hard to completely get invested in the other thing when you're like, yeah, but I if you're going to call to be on some average show, but it's going to be a paycheck and help the resume, I'm going to take that. It's always going to be compromised. And then you're right as well that one of my I still have a little bit of a regret about how many hours of my life I've spent reading bad scripts, because that's what you have to do as an actor, and it
Yeah,
doesn't really
exactly.
go away. And just that thing of reading scripts, putting down auditions, like reading scripts, learning lines, doing auditions, it just eats so much time, and it's so much of what you read. um and then things were ticking over and doing most of that, and then got Black Sails, the pirate show where I played Long John Silver, and I think a few elements came together on that. One being the kind of cast we had, and it was like the cast you'd get when you're doing a play, which is generally very like well read, creative, interesting people who you are all now we're all in South Africa. We're generally all put up in these kind of apartments together, and we've got a lot of work to do, but we've also got a bunch of time sitting around. And when you've got people like Toby Stevens, who played Flint, and Toby Schmitz, who played Rackham, who are voracious readers, very well read, very creative in their own right. And both of them, I think, had a different level of education than me, and kind of, I didn't really grow up in a family or went to a kind of school that's that extremely well read,
Mm.
kind of thing. It was like my dad's very smart and has read a lot, but there's a certain kind of culture, I think, that some people get, and especially then people out of, I think in England have generally a different kind of vibe and culture around art and reading and literature than a lot of people in Australia
It's
might.
a bit more posh.
Yeah, and just it's a thing people do and talk about, and it's part
Yeah.
of their history. And so I was just like, I think, very excited about being around this group, and kind of suddenly it's like, oh, I get to be around these very, yeah, intelligent, generous people who are always going, oh, you should read this, read that. And so I think that kicked that up. And then at the same time, as we got to the end of it, just for me as an actor, it was that job and some other jobs that I'd been able to do during those 4 years I was on Black Sails were just far and above what I expected I might ever get to do as an actor. They were, I was really proud of the work on that. I felt it was something like everyone on Black Sails felt like those roles were ours and we were part of the creative
Mm,
process, and we got to really give everything to those characters over that time. And so as it was wrapping up, um, that feeling of like, I just felt very satisfied as an actor, I guess. That actor in me that, gone like, oh, I hope I get to do this one day. And that was like, I think that was it. And that may or may not be the best thing I ever get to do, and as far as the most satisfying creatively. So it really meant that writer in me who'd been sitting dormant, was almost going like, okay, we've done that. Could we put some time into the other stuff? And I really
yeah.
felt like, oh yeah, I can now. I can go and spend all day, well, I mean, all day, like weeks and months, focusing on writing, not auditioning. Maybe something really great comes through, but happy to just go like, nah, I'm busy with other stuff for the moment. I want to focus on this. I want to give it all my attention,
Yeah.
and yeah. So that's kind of, I think, being able to have that acting job that made me satisfied let me give my full focus to that, which was a real joy and something I feel very grateful for.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing because it sounds like, I've had experiences like this where it's like this, um, a lot of people talk about the zone in regards to sports or other things, but it's like
Yeah,
for me, creativity and like doing something like writing, or in my case, like I was a tattoo artist, I draw a lot and stuff like that. There's like this creative symbiosis that comes through just like the process, and especially
yeah.
if you're doing something collaborative like acting and being on a set with these other intelligent people, their creativity is just feeding back into you, and at the end of it it's just like, you know be like maybe from like my personal perspective, a bit of like a waste to just not put that creativity into something really tangible.
Yeah, well, that's right. That we spent 4 years just like all working together, building this stuff, and that's kind of where, I mean, I am my mind. I have a creative mind. That's what lights it up. That's what it wants to be doing. And so when you're with a cast that, even though we're going to go out and we definitely drank our way through the, enough Castle Lights, the local
you
beer,
you were
to
pirates, man,
hit my
it's
flat.
fine.
Exactly. But still, we'd always come back to, as we're sitting around, you'd be going like, okay, so how are we going to play that thing on the
Mm,
next day? Or someone going like, hey, I'm thinking of changing this line. What do you think? Like, all our minds were still on this thing because we knew it could be great, and that it was great, and that we were the actors actually got to be a driving, some part of the engine of this, in cohesion with everyone else. Our ideas were respected. What we were bringing to it was respected. We as a group were willing to go above and beyond with the rehearsals and the work to make sure that we could give everything to the production. Um, and so you've got all that energy, and then as you're getting to the end of it, and now there's, we start shooting scenes, and for the first time there's no new scenes coming in, that our creative engines were so kind of well honed and ready to go, that it was quite easy to just go like, all right, let's just put all that stuff into writing a book now. Because and then as well, it's great when you've got those great minds around. I think I wrote the short story version over a weekend, and then Toby Stevens was one of the first people to read it, and Schmitz read it, and Jessica Parker actually, Jessica Parker Kenny, I think, was the first one to read it and tell me like, hey, this is really good, I like this. It's like, yeah, I think this could be a book. And having people that you respect and admire tell you that they like what you're doing is, I mean, we writing, you have to rely on, and all of us do it, everything, but with writing you have to go through long stretches of relying on that kind of self belief as it bashes up against your your fear and your imposter syndrome and all those things there. That having some people like that say that they liked reading what you wrote can definitely help you get through those first hurdles.
Yeah, because especially at the beginning, there's just that motivational deficit of fucking self doubt and all this crap that just
Yeah,
tells you like, yeah, why is anyone like you mentioned imposter syndrome? Why does anyone want to read your work? It's like I don't know why would they want to read my work. So I
yeah.
mean, it's amazing. Like it's really so cool to hear that you had this these people around you, this environment that really fostered um, your confidence and your creativity in that way. And you know, the short story, I want to hear more about where the initial idea for Fetch Phillips came from. You mentioned Raymond Chandler as well. So, what were sort of the origins of the short story, and then how did that, once it got picked up by Orbit, how did that sort of transition and blossom into the full world and character that we know today?
Yeah, so look, I think I'd written a version of like the very beginning of this when I was 18, 17 actually. Yeah, maybe 17 actually. Like a version of a kind of gumshoe in a fantasy world.
Yeah,
At that time it still had its magic. It was a bit of that, like a pretty just clear using all the tropes, having fun with it. Look, I think I did a similar. I remember doing a sci-fi thing in that world in like must have been in year 7 or something as well. Like I think I always liked the kind of gumshoe idea. I love film noir. Um, and so it was both the cinematic thing. I'd watch all the bogey movies and love going down that road, as well as read, like, yeah, dad read the Raymond Chandler books, and so I read them and I really liked his humor and the style. And I think he was one of those characters that I just connected with early on. There was something in Philip Marlowe that I just went, this feels like my kind of guy. And that we all have those kind of comfort books we go back to, and Chandler was that for me.
he's kind of like the relatable everyman, you know.
Yeah, and there's something like I love. Raymond Chandler has a fantastic essay. The Simple Art of Murder, is it, or is that the short story? Oh, what's it? Anyway? There's an essay where he talks about who the noir hero is, and I remember reading that, and it's just like I love. There's something about that as the hero. There's something about the kind of his quiet code. What yeah, it's a great description. It's really good to go read
I need to
for
read that.
anyone to
I
go read.
love Raymond's work, but
Yeah,
I haven't read that.
yeah. I'll find it and I'll find it so I just send it to you, and if you put it in the
Cool.
show notes or whatever. It's a great little just description of who the noir hero should be, and I guess that may be imprinted on me a little bit because I loved Marlowe. Yeah, there's something about the sense of humor, the a somewhat a the way his kind of simmering self-loathing rides against exactly that, a code and a modest righteousness and a sense of right and wrong in a broken place. Just they're things that went like, okay, I like this kind of hero, and it's a kind of hero that it's matches a kind of Indiana Jones and those other kind of guys that I guess I'd already seen on film and telly. Um, and I liked, and I felt writing that voice came quite naturally to me, I guess, compared to writing certain other kinds of stories. So when
Hmm.
I decided to write a story, often that kind of hero would be at the center of it. And I tried to write, I think the version. Then when I was at drama school in one of the holiday breaks when I didn't have enough money to travel out of Perth where I was staying, and but pretty much everyone else did. I wrote, I guess, what it would have been like 30,000 words or something of a version before school came back, and thought like, oh, I'll continue that, and then never got back to actually doing that version. But it did let me practice with some of the world stuff and build some other characters that have actually been in, had come to play a part of it, but then left it again for, beyond 10 years or whatever before I then wrote that short story during the Black Sales time, because the other cast said they kind of liked it. Then when we finished, I went, well, that's what I'm doing now. I'm turning this into a book. And then I guess over the course of that year, I'd write it. I turned it into a full book form. Was lucky enough again to have some people read it. A friend of mine, Stephen Lochran, who wrote. He's done a couple of kind of more like middle grade series, one called Paladero about a dinosaur riding cowboys, which is really great.
Nice.
And he, yeah, and he works in publishing too. So he was my first, another person I really had to rely on to go like, is this something? Does this work? Am I doing the right thing? What do I do with it now? And so it was Lockers was great for that, as well as Daphne or Olive, who, if there are any Black Sails fans, there's a podcast called Fathoms Deep that she was one of the hosts of, and she was one of the early readers as well. And so they helped being those positive voices I needed while I was turning the short story into a novel size. The rewrites I did there, and then started handing it out to lit agents and publishers, and was getting some bites, and then Orbit came along.
Man, that's awesome. And like Philip Marlowe, the simmering protagonist, this story simmered for years and years and years before coming to light. But I love that, it's like it's something that spoke true to you, and you felt like however long this idea has been in your head, you stuck with it and you understood like this is something that I'm really passionate about, and now here you are. It's like 3 books into the series. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it is bizarre, and I think what really unlocked it, which was interesting, is I think at some point what maybe helped me, because maybe when you go back and write it, and there can be things you go, oh, this is fun, or I like this style, and that's probably what I was doing the first few times, and then even maybe the short story was still kind of mostly that maybe, but then the thing I think I maybe unlocked for myself when I was turning it into the full manuscript was maybe dissecting why I liked this noir hero, why I
Mm,
attached to it, what I thought those heroes, what they represented to me, and why it was maybe a flawed idea to want to aspire to be someone like that. Like it's so cool to be the idea, and I'd kind of go back and realize that, like, oh, was a somewhat insecure teenager, the idea of, like, when you look at Bogart playing these characters, and he doesn't care anymore because something awful's happened to him, so he doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care what anyone thinks,
yeah.
and it just felt like going, oh God, I can't wait till I turn into that. That looks like so much easier than all this weird social anxiety I get every time I open
Yeah,
my mouth.
yeah.
And then, of course, as you grow up, you go like, well, that's not. It does. One, it doesn't feel good to
It's
be
like the
that
asshole as
person.
aspiration doesn't really work out in the real
No,
world.
that's right. Well, and even if you go like, oh yeah, like, hey, maybe it does make things easier when you just cop out of everything like that, but it doesn't make you a good person in any way. It doesn't make you good to the people around you. It doesn't make you a useful part of society. And so I think then when that kind of opened up to going, like, I started finding that interesting because, like, when I write stuff, I like, I don't think I know how to write. I'd never be able to write something where I feel like I've got a real message I want to tell people, and this
Mm,
book's gonna drive that message home because I'm so full of self doubt, or always I constantly will question what I think, that there's no way I'll get to the end of the book without going like, you piece of shit, who do you think you are, that you've got some bit of wisdom you're going to bestow on people and
preachy
teach them some
motherfucker.
lesson. Yeah, like, it has to be because there's something I don't know, and that maybe
Yeah.
through writing this I can explore and get underneath that feeling or that idea in my head or that question I have.
Like
And
writing
so,
writing and story is like self-discovery in a way.
yeah, and then you have to have enough kind of belief in, your own experience in your mind to go like, oh good, if I'm thinking about this stuff, I imagine someone else out there must be, and that me putting the time into this might uncover some stuff or have some thoughts that will either be interesting to them or reveal new stuff to them as it reveals it to me, or just lets them know that thing that we want from a lot of art, is just to go like, oh, my weird mind that I feel like I'm like some individual freak is actually really quite common, and a lot of people think the same.
Yeah.
um so yeah, that's the kind of thing, and I think there was something in Fetch, the whole thing being a bit of the kind of disillusioned idea of when the world seems magical when you're little, and then you grow up and you look around and it's suddenly not so magical anymore, but you have a kind of sneaking suspicion that that's your fault, that it's because of the
Mhm.
things you went after and the choices you made and the things you did to yourself to make yourself seem like a man or a grown up or a serious person in the world or whoever, and there was something in that I found interesting, and that's probably what, in conjunction with everything else, propelled me to be able to get through a full manuscript and to go back and rewrite it the million times you need to rewrite it, because I was trying to get to the heart of something that was gnawing away at my own brain.
Yeah, just the jaded nature of growing up and everything like that.
Yeah.
but that leads perfectly into, because for me, Fetch is the heart of the series, and it sounds like he is for you. He's he's the soul of the story and what's propelling everything forward. And this sort of uh, magic, non-magic dichotomy is actually something that really defines the world, and it defines his arc as a character. And you were part of a TBRCon panel about morally gray characters back in January, and you touched upon a few things that you brought up there. But I really love that, you know, Fetch himself, I wouldn't necessarily say that he's like an outright morally gray character, but this is something that Fonda Lee mentioned to me back in the fall. I don't create morally gray characters. I create morally gray worlds, and the characters that inhabit them just so happen to fall into certain trappings of whatever that world has established. So for you, you have this nice balance between Fetch as bit of a dick sometimes.
Yeah.
But he's like on a soul searching mission, but at the same time, he's also an everyman and he's very relatable. So, how did you go about balancing those aspects of his personality, but also giving him that surrounding world that is also morally questionable? And then giving the story itself, the emotions and friendships and everything that sort of makes it feel more genuine and human.
Yeah, I think for me, it's you make the right character for the world and the right world for the character,
Mm,
and that Fetch really wouldn't be. You couldn't pluck him out and put him in a different story in a different world, because it all the richness of his experience comes through the with that the fact he is in a world that has recently lost its magic, that he is partly responsible for and feels personally very responsible for. And so that's going to taint his experience with everyone else. It's a reason, and because that hits that kind of dark, there's such a dark romantic quality to that everywhere he look, so it's a reason to also get away with those kind of noirish descriptions, because
mm,
it's always got like, well, why does this character care about this stuff? Yeah, and like for him, it's like, oh, he'll go into detail about describing the way things were, because he remembers how affecting it was for him when he first walked into Sunder City. He didn't know magic existed. He escapes from his walled off city, and he remembers in his defining time as a young man, how incredible it was to see all this in its heyday, and now all the shine's taken off everything, and
mm.
he sees his own guilt reflected back. So the world and Fetch is so intertwined that, in my mind, then every bit of description becomes revealing about his character, and vice versa. Everything he does, and the plot, the character, the world building is all together. And so at that point, kind of whatever seems interesting to write about feels like it's going to have serve multiple things. And so, um, and then it is interesting as you go, because it's funny, you can want to do certain things, and at a certain point Fetch does have his own stuff and his things that he struggles with, and he's not gonna do he's not going to be the man that he wishes he could be. He's not going to react in the ways that he wishes he could. His emotions are going to get the better of him. His traumas are going to influence the way he reacts to stuff. He's going to, I mean, we all know what it's like to be in situations and have a voice in your head telling you to act a certain way or do something, and you just can't, because we can't always be who we hope we are, which is a huge thing for Fetch. And
Exactly.
it's interesting you say about the other, the secondary characters as well. It's been one of the tough things with Fetch, that I think, one of the things, if you don't like yourself, it can be very hard to build strong connections and true connections
Yeah.
with other people, because you're just always going, well, why would they like it's hard to think of anyone being your real friend, because you're like, well, why would they like me, because I'm obviously the piece of shit who broke the world and can't seem to get anything right. And so
But then it's just this like positive in parentheses, air
Yeah.
quotes, negative feedback loop where it's just like, I think I'm a piece of shit, so why would anybody like me? And then everyone else is just like, he thinks he's a piece of shit. I don't like that. And then nobody
Exa-
wants to hang out with you.
Exactly, and I think, and so that's the thing where you with Fetch, you go like you have all these secondary characters, and you see some of them who kind of really care for him or have these, and obviously see him as his own worst enemy, as I mentioned, a lot of readers do, and and he is, and so that it's interesting building building this cast of characters, and but having knowing our protagonist is kind of hamstrung by those
Mm,
his connection to his guilt and his and his own self-loathing, which is another form of self-obsession, the same as narcissism or anything like that. And so yeah, you've kind of got this dying fantasy world, and this kind of dangling quest there of like, but could we go turn the magic back? But what's really going on is it's all inside Fetch and his personal journey of going like,
mhm,
okay, what have you got to sort out in yourself so you can actually be be a good force for the people struggling with what they're struggling with here. And so yeah, and it's just been really interesting because I find that stuff really interesting, and then you work out, okay, what magical creatures or characters do we get to build around him to reflect that stuff back. Um, but it's but and which is also then the noir stuff, like that whole idea of the morally grey or dark world. That's what all noir is, like the classic line at the end of Chinatown. Where like you forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. It's like all the worst things happen, and it's like, yeah, what do you
it is what it
expect?
is,
Like,
man.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, you tried to be a better man, did you? Like, well, guess what? That's not the way the world works. And so there's also that stuff going on where trying to work out Fetch is trying to work out what you actually do when and sometimes it's like, okay, is it about me doing this thing? Should I help this person? Do I need to be a violent man in a violent world? Um and it's for me, it's interesting because it's something I think about, and I guess as we all watch the world fall apart around us, we a lot of us have those kind of questions too. So it's a bit of a feeling of getting to explore some of that stuff in maybe the safe world of Sunder City rather than
Mm,
going and making my own life too messy in the real world at the
yeah.
moment. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that Sunder City is safe, but go to the sickle, you'll get fucked up. But yeah,
Oh, safe for me.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
as
I
the
can make
creator,
stuff
it is my
happen. Yes,
safe
that's right.
space, yeah. But,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I really love what you did in terms of this balance between, the world building and the character. Like you said, they're all intertwined, but you strike a nice balance between all of that, and I love how you've fleshed out this world with each consecutive book, and Sunder City really feels like a foil for Fetch's internal turmoil and all the crap that he's dealing with and sort of like projecting out onto the world itself.
yeah,
Um, because you see other characters and other creatures who are like, I'm an actual magical creature who got fucked over by the magic just being shut off. So how do you think I feel? Whereas Fetch is a human, and so humans were unaffected by this physically. And so I like how you establish that, and it's just like Fetch is in his own head a lot, and you said he's a lot of readers think he's his own worst enemy, and that is true in
yeah,
noir, but that is true in this case too. But Sunder City, I think for me acts as like this nice foundational character throughout the series on Fetch's at Fetch's side. So it's like as the story is progressing, Sunder City is changing as much as Fetch is changing, and you really created this place, this setting that feels alive. So how did you go about creating that city in the first place, and then at the same time giving it sort of like a distinct history and character as well?
yeah. I did. I think a lot of it just happened. I think I started writing first. In a way that's maybe not the least cool way. Oh no, in this crowd, it's great. Yeah, but yeah, like it's almost like I think when I wrote that first short story, I hadn't thought too much about it, and I just kind of took Fetch out on the streets, and it's almost like playing D&D on the fly. Going
Yeah.
like, okay, so he goes here. So what's that gonna be like? And letting it,
Yeah.
knowing the themes I was playing with and where Fetch was, what's the most interesting thing for him to come across at that moment, and also as it just, it starts to, your mind just starts to fill in the gaps with certain things, which is really nice. And then, through edits, you work out what actually serves, what maybe doesn't, and Or sometimes you go like, "Oh, that has an interesting feeling to it," but at the moment it's not really doing much for the story. So work out what can happen there to tie things in. Um, yeah, so I didn't do lots of, and then maybe it was probably only when like the manuscript was done or I'd done a couple of drafts. It was like, okay, I'd better open up another document here and start jotting down some, some actual historical notes and some characters so I can keep
Yeah.
track of this stuff because it kind of grew somewhat organically. And then with I'd say books 2 and 3, which I actually planned, that's more where then I'd write some big documents going in and go like, okay, I
Hmm.
better build some history here first and work out. But it's always in flux, and that's like it's why I don't do too much world building outside what's particularly needed for the story right now,
Yeah.
because I don't see much sense in having anything like start to set things in stone in my head if they're not going to be in the story. It can sometimes be,
Yeah.
nice, and I know some writers it really helps with the authenticity of their world and that they know more than what's said here. But for me, I kind of like to be able to feel like it's all still, you know, none of the paint is set, and at any point you can shift things as needed if you're like, oh, that's actually going to help tie this in, and because if there's yeah, I think the books there's it's tough because the books always have an inherent dissatisfaction in them because they're noir and it's kind of the nature of them. But especially with books, like with book 2, it was like, okay, this is going to be a bit more of a tighter case than the first one was, with kind of all
Hmm.
these interweaving elements, and you go, maybe that's what people are turning up for that, and then it's a character study and so you want to make sure Fetch's journey all feels right and connected, and you want the world building to be there. And it's interesting that I do wonder, like, if someone else had published it, whether it would be like, I do think in the edits I've had to take more of a focus on world building because I'm like, oh, like once it's coming out with Orbit, like a SFS publisher, it's like, oh, this is really now a fantasy book. And I know
Yeah.
it always was, but it's funny in my head it happening more of a detective story set in a fantasy world. Um, and yeah, so I kind of it's something that happens a bit organically. I have kind of planned out some big stuff overall. A lot of that's more character stuff. And I do have some histories, like I know some histories and some historical characters, and I've written out when certain things changed and when certain creatures were born and when cities and stuff were made. So I've got a bunch of that there. I think naturally for me, it's maybe my least interesting part of the whole stuff until it actually ties in with what the character's doing at a particular moment.
Yeah, but I mean, it feels natural in the sense that Fetch's own personal history ties into the major pivotal event in this world,
Yeah.
which is the shift from a magical world to a non-magical sort of like dying world in a way,
Yeah.
in the sense of like the magical creatures, and that only takes place I think 6 years or so before the first book,
Yeah.
more or less. And then
Yeah.
in books 2 and 3, you know, I think you exactly what you mentioned, like what serves the purpose of the story, and you naturally built upon the world as the characters left Sunder City. So there are some moments where it's like you get to spend a bit of time in Dead Man in a Ditch outside of the city, and then a good portion of One Foot in the Fade is spent on this sort of really cool, um, just I
Well,
won't
yeah,
spoil
Fetch is
anything
trying to
beyond.
no.
There's like there's a journey that he takes with a group of characters, and it's sort of like get the gang together and then we're gonna go steal some shit, and it's really good.
Yeah.
I won't say anything beyond that because it's a really awesome section of the book. But
Oh,
you know,
good. I'm
you
glad you.
had
Well, it is. Like I will say with book 3, it's where Fetch is trying to be a fantasy hero. Is
yeah,
almost, and you get a section that's living
exactly.
up to that event. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's like he's literally just trying to embody this ideal of uh my own personal hero's journey, but then you bring back that noir uh sort of like critique of just like, are you really a hero though? Like, what are you
Yeah.
fighting for? All that kind of stuff. So I really love that. But at the same time, it's like you get to see more of Architelos and you get to expand on this world a little bit and see like outside of Sunder City, which is sort of like the mecca
Mm.
of modernization and industrialization. what the fuck's going on out there? People are
Yeah.
like in the shit, you know?
Yeah, and that's which is something that definitely in further ones get to explore more. It's nice kind of getting a taste of it now, I guess, and seeing where it goes. And then yeah, seeing some glimpses there, because it's another thing as well. And I think what I maybe relied on at the big, it's funny relying on the fact, yeah, of Fetch's naivety is really
Mhm.
useful. That he grew up sheltered. He's then mostly he got to tour around a bit as a soldier, but I think as a soldier, it's like, okay, we're going to go here, we're going to do this thing, follow these orders. He
Mhm.
has not spent much time actually out in other cultures, in other cities, living. So Sunder City is what he knows, and he didn't even know about that until he was, he'd gone through all his schooling years and was a young man. So that ignorance really helps, and him also not always being the smartest guy as well. Like, I'm working on another project recently, which haven't been able to announce, but have a much smarter character. And it's like, oh, this is a
Mhm.
lot tougher to write when you're like, oh, this guy has to know some shit. It's like, oh, give me
Yeah,
a
because
dum dum to write.
the
It's much easier.
just like the blockhead can just kind of fumble his way into situations and, fumble
Yeah,
his way out of them as well. But if it's a
yeah,
smart
and
character, it's
ask
like, "Oh, man, I have to be
questions.
smart." Shit.
Exactly. It's a lot more work to write smart characters. So there's something very comfortable about writing Fetch's naive, dumbed up, and at certain points,
Yeah.
like I don't think there's been many great inconsistencies in it, but if there is, you can go like, oh yeah, well, Fetch take a lot of hits to the head. He sometimes gets
Oh,
his
yeah.
facts mixed up. Yeah. So, but yeah, it is. Yeah, there's something fun about that and about Fetch. Yeah, look, it's I'm not by no means the first one to do it. I've got writing the as the audience surrogate, have someone who knows less and then gets to discover the world with them. And Fetch is constantly on the back foot, which definitely helps.
Mhm. Yeah, but then sort of, we talked about this noir element of having, like,
Mm,
uh I guess like the code, what have
mm,
you, sort of like a moral compass within a morally gray world. But I think Fetch acts as a really good window through which to see. I want to see this world rejuvenated with the magic that I, excuse me, rejuvenated with the magic that I had a part in plucking away from all of these creatures. But at the same time, sort of coming to grips with the fact that this world might not necessarily want that back, but or the fact that there's a tastier carrot on the end of the stick with modernization and industrialization, you know, factories and cars and all this glitzy shit that people are
yeah.
just like, oh, the lights are back on, so we're cool with this, and we don't necessarily feel the need to put any mental capacity into thinking about what it was like before because this is here now and life is tough and I'm just gonna roll with it. So I like how you had that nature and magic versus industrialization kind of take a front seat in the series, which is really powerful, especially when Sunder City is this sort of like iconic city in this world and people are just getting swept up in it.
Yeah, and it's tough because it's fun, writing it and going like sometimes you're like it's all complicated. That same thing that once again like that morally grey world that you were saying, Fonda mentioned, because you go, yeah, like, and that's kind of one of the tough questions of the second book, where it's just like, well, yeah, like everyone's running towards this thing, and one of the problems is that if you do that, you're putting a lot of power in the hands of some immoral people and some people who might be doing this and who are compromising other people, and it might be leading us to a bad place. But you're like, yeah, but it's got the heating on. So, like you
Yeah.
might have a bunch of real like ideals, and you might see where this is going and that this is bad, but do you want people to freeze to death in their homes so you can create a better world? Um that it's complicated stuff, and it's things that I you know it, questions that everyone kind of deals with, and that right now we all as a humanity have a lot of questions to ask about the compromises we want to make to our quality of life for the future. And it's like, and that what we ask, what we want the things that we think, maybe some of us say we should do as a collective, but are we willing to do them as individuals, or,
Yeah.
or vice versa, and that stuff. So yeah, there's something in it as it, sometimes you throw something in there and you think it's, when you start to do it, it feels fairly black and white, and you feel like, cool, I got something to say about this. And then as you dig in, you're like, if you write honestly and you really put yourself in there and make sure you've got a bunch of other characters coming in with different points of view, you can start to create something where every way you turn it, you can see it, see a different angle. So
Hmm.
yeah, it is, and that's kind of maybe part of the fun of the third one of, for a little bit maybe trying to, feeling Fetch's desire to go back to a simpler time and see things in a simpler way, and that maybe you want to pick up as a reader and go like, like, can't we just have a satisfying fantasy quest for a little bit? And it's like, well, we'll flirt with it, but we'll see where it goes. Yeah.
Flirt is a good word for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. And now that you're, 3 books into the series, we've touched on it a little bit, but sort of how has your approach been for writing each consecutive sequel and, your writing process, but also, we've talked about confidence as a writer and that kind of stuff. How has your confidence evolved? How has your sort of like sense of the craft evolved?
Yeah. Oh, it's weird. So, I mean, it's the first one I didn't know I was writing a book. It started as a short story and some people read
Mhm.
it. And then I think at one point I thought like, oh, I'll just do, like, I'll make it a more, like, there'll be a bunch of short stories within this, like how the Raymond Chandler stories first started. They were kind of in Black Mask magazine, and and then he kind of pulled the novels out of that. So you cram a couple
Mhm.
together, and I thought that could be fun. And then my friend who knows publishing is like, you can't sell it. Yeah,
No.
off the bat, some short
Not at
stories were
not at
just
first, not at first,
yeah,
not
none of
at
it. I was like, no, no, no.
first.
So I didn't know, and it was all kind of fun and experimental, and and it was kind of for me. So the fact that then when someone was like, um, we want to publish it. It's like, oh, that's amazing, and there's no real expectations, and um, then I guess it's weird that as it goes on, you do more. You'd expect a greater level of confidence. So yeah, it's that thing where you'd think more confidence had come, but but now it's like, oh, I'm meant to actually be an author now. I'm meant to know what I'm doing. So a different level of expectation and kind of self critique comes. So I and you're never doing the same thing twice. Like, I think in any creative endeavor, and I guess I know that as an actor, that the moment you go into any acting role and just think like, because generally you end, if you do a role for a while, by the end, you feel so. At the beginning, you're pulling your hair out and you're stressing over everything. You don't sleep before the first day of shooting, and you're just waiting for that little bit of positive feedback from the director or for someone else. And then by the last day of shooting, you just like, this character inside and out. You don't have to, if they've got an accent, or you just know how to drop into them. You know how to go like, no, that doesn't feel right, maybe it should be more like this, and you can just trust it. And then if you take that confidence and think like, oh, I've worked out acting, and you go into your next job and think like, cool, I can just plug right in, here we go, you're gonna fall to pieces.
Yeah.
And it's happened to me, I've seen it happen to other actors. It's like, after that first real triumph, usually the next thing you're going to have a complete, unless you understand that you are now a student again, you are, that this character is a new thing that you know nothing about, and you must go in knowing that you know nothing and be
Mm.
ready to do all the work and build it up. You're in trouble. And I think that's the same thing with writing, that unless you're just going to deliver the same thing again, you've got to go in. And that's why, like, Fetch's shifts are subtle in some ways, but also quite, like, he's kind of a different guy in each book, whatever he's gone through. I don't worry too much, about going, does this feel right for Fetch? It's just like, put yourself in his position right now through his eyes, feeling what he feels, and how would he react to this? And offer, and y- throwing this thing at him with what's happened to him, what would that do? And so in that, well, I sometimes can be quite meticulous with the planning of the plot. You kind of try and meticulously plan what the other people are doing, what the antagonist might do, or what the crime is, and what they're up to. How the hero's going to react to it, I don't often really know until we get into it, and often that'll shift, and you go like, I really wanted to get here, but I feel like forcing them to get to that point just doesn't feel right. So
Mhm.
things are gonna shift, and so even though I plan it a lot, often then by the end of it, it's different enough and sometimes weird enough and strange enough that by the time I'm sending it off to people, I have no idea whether, even though, like, when you pitch the next book to the publishers or whatever, you write a little one page, it's like the next great installment of the Fetch Phillips, archives is going here and this happens. And before it's written, I can say this is the greatest thing you're ever going to fucking read. And, like, it's like,
Yeah.
this will be amazing. Just wait. But by the time it's done, I think if you've done it, like if you haven't just painted by numbers and you've actually really gone in and run that razor's edge of what is interesting but also is true and is complicated, then you end up with something that I don't think, like, yeah, like I mostly got, really good reviews for each one of them, but I think I've only ever felt relief. That's the kind of the most I get someone when someone comes back and you get a glowing review. I'm just like, phew, great. I just want it because the fear is that I've really screwed something up, or I've gone way off base, or I've explored something that either other people don't find that interesting, or they're like, yeah, you're coming to some obvious conclusions here, or it's like, oh, we don't even know what you're on about. So yeah, I think it's it I I feel like I'm never going to get to the point where I'm with anything creative where I'm like, I know what I'm doing now. Let me
Yeah.
just sit down, do the hours. I'll deliver something that I'm going to feel fine
Yeah, do the hours for fiction is a good practice, but I
about.
think
Yeah,
you've got a very pragmatic attitude, and I think that is, like you said, it applies to acting, it applies to writing, but I think it applies to so many different creative endeavors, but, you know, as you say, finding that razor's edge between what feels true, as well as interesting is
yeah,
just going to result in a story that is genuinely reflective of you, and as a result is genuinely reflective of Fetch, because it's like, oh shit, the story surprised me, we're going that way instead of this way. To a reader, for you it might come
yeah,
across as like a very big surprise, because it's like you already had this forethought of what's coming in the story, and
yes,
then you're like, fuck, that's way different, I don't know where I'm going
yeah,
here.
yeah.
But for the reader, from my perspective reading your books, it feels genuine for the character, for Fetch, and for the sort of thrust and narrative that he's been following through these three books.
And as well, you go, it's always once you've made that change, and if you do that, as long as you're happy doing the work and get excited by all the shifts, then you go, once that's the new story, and you forget the old version, you come in and you can do all you staple all the bits together that make it feel like that was planned from the start. Hopefully,
Yeah.
that's just that next draft to go like, oh, hang on, well, I better set that up and put this thing there.
Yeah.
Um, and I do.
Like a beautiful Frankenstein that you just have to smooth out the edges every single
Exactly.
time. Yeah.
Exactly. And the second and third are less like that. Like the first, I did the first one, I say I kind of played it like an accordion. You just go, like,
Mhm.
okay, it's going to go here. No, chop all that stuff out and bring it there because I didn't know it was going to be a book at the start. The second, the third definitely had a more, a structure that was there from the beginning. So the changes were never quite as dramatic. Um, but also, I think, but it will be interesting from here because I think, definitely without saying too much, that there's a kind of, it's a subtle but kind of nice little arc, these three books for Fetch. I think he kind of, if there was one lesson he needed to learn across the three books, he's kind of got close to it by the end of the third,
Yeah.
potentially. And I think, which is really interesting to get, like, it's not, it doesn't mean, there's maybe not huge shifts in a lot of ways, but it feels like the right, the right place to leave him at that point. And so, um, it's just a little bit of deciding at the moment whether it's going to be another Fetch book next, or I'm going to write something else for a bit. Let him sit. Let that story sit, and then it's also like I'm getting more interested now and going like, even though this world is made for Fetch and he's made for the world, you go
Mhm.
like, well, there is probably room now to start bringing some other point of view characters in because
Yeah.
yeah, if we go like, okay, he's got to that point, and I know more about the world, and we've had these other characters who've already been dropped in. So I think from he take letting him kind of complete that little circle means there's now a chance for things to explode in new ways going forward.
No, I love that, and that's exactly what I was going to ask you about. Is sort of like what the future of Fetch as a character, but also the series, and I love that you want to bring more POV characters into it because it's like I read someone like Eileen Tide, and I'm just like, you're fucking awesome. I want to know more about you. It's like you're a librarian, but you're so interesting. So
Yeah,
it's just like give me more of her. It's just, I feel like the
yeah,
world has a lot to offer, and you could present diverse perspectives that really flesh that out, and maybe seeing Fetch from the outside, people get to
yeah.
understand him a little bit more too.
That's definitely the fun thing is like as
Yeah.
I'm kind of outlining this next one with these other point of view characters, these moments where each of them will get to see Fetch is going to be fun because he's so, and that's partly what I'll be playing with as well, which I find interesting is how we see ourselves compared to how other people see us, and
Hmm.
so playing that not only with Fetch but with everyone else, these people that we've only seen through his point of view, getting to actually drop into their heads and see how they feel themselves and the roles they play and why they do some of the things they do. So that's definitely that in the next Sunder installment. That is the plan.
Hmm.
Whether that's the next book I release or not, we'll be working out soon. I think because
It's all
got
good,
got
man.
a million plates in the air. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. No, that's awesome. I mean, whatever you release next, I'm really looking forward to it. And I want to close out with just a couple of questions. First off, who is one of your favorite morally gray characters or worlds? Since we've been kind of straddling that line.
Oh, look. I'm just gonna go really obvious, only because I was uh back in buying comic books yesterday and stuff. It's like Wolverine's just a guy. It's
Mm,
funny, just one of those one. And I know it's like a that maybe feels a little mainstream, but I still, in a similar way, one of those early characters that I guess kind of got under my skin early on, and whoever's drawing him, acting him, writing him, it's it feels like one of those old friends of pop culture that I love going back to.
just a compelling guy. And you got the
Yeah.
mustache to match up with that mood, man. You're all
Yeah,
set.
and not the tallest guy. There's something in that too. I think that like
Yeah,
I'll
but
be really annoyed
I
if
got
they
an
cast.
adamantium skeleton, man. It's all good.
Yeah,
I don't
there
need
you
height.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll be really annoyed if they cast another 6 foot someone dude as the next Wolverine. It's like we
Hey,
need
man, at
another
least you're
short king.
Australian.
Yeah,
You're like
yeah.
halfway
That's,
there.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you
We'll
know.
see how we go. Yeah.
Awesome. And what are you currently reading? I mean, we mentioned earlier that you're sort of playing catch up with a lot of SFF these days, but what are you currently reading or watching or listening to?
um, I'm reading. Oh, watching. I just finished Severance this week, which is
Ooh,
so good.
I want to get
Oh,
around to that. Yeah.
it's really beautifully done. Um, I'm reading Plato's Republic at the moment, which is actually like I'm like,
Dude, we're two
s-
years into the pandemic. What's going on with you?
yeah, yeah, that's right. That's one of those ones. So I'm really enjoying it. It's making me kind of like chuckle a bit more than I expected. It's like I'm really enjoying the tone of it. And I travel around everywhere with heaps of books, and I'm about to go to the airport. I've already got too much luggage, but I bought some other comics yesterday. I haven't actually read any Swamp Thing, so I've got the recent run of Swamp Thing as well as the Alan Moore one, which I hadn't
Yeah,
read
I was gonna
before.
ask if you've read the Alan Moore one. That one
No,
is
so I got that, and but I'm loving the. I've just been seeing kind of I'm following the artists on this new one that I guess has been going for the last year or something, and I'm really loving
mhm.
that. So that's kind of what drew me in. But then I'm like, well, I've got to do the Alan Moore one. So they're the kind of things I'm carrying around with me at the moment. There's always a bunch of books. As far as sci-fi fantasy stuff goes, it's actually I'm probably even though I'm meant to be playing catch up, I think it's been a little while since I'm trying to think. Did I just my brain? It's
You're
it all
floundering,
vanishes
Luke.
from your
Come
brain.
on,
Yeah,
man.
so that's it. But there we go. There's yeah. I need to dig back in. But I'll get I'll finish Plato's Republic first, and then I'll jump back in.
Oh, you good? That's some
Yeah,
dense stuff, man. Come on.
yeah, yeah. That's it. That's why it's moving a bit slow, I think, and why I can't remember whatever I was reading before. Yeah.
It's all good, man. But I really appreciate you taking the time today, Luke, chatting with me and taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you got to get going soon, but Thank you so much. If you could tell listeners and viewers where they can find you on social media or where they can see you on television or whatnot, and where they can pick up the Fetch Phillip archives.
Yeah. So no, thank you so much for having me. This was really great, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Long Luke Arnold on Twitter and Instagram, like Long John Silver, but me. And yeah, I mean, the One Foot in the Fade, third book in the Fetch Phillips Archives comes out. It always the best thing is to ask your local bookstore, because then if they
Hmm.
don't have it in, to get it in, that is ideal. But
Brick and mortar.
yeah, that's the way to do it, especially post pandemic. That is the ideal place to do it. The audiobook's also available, which I record myself. So if you're an audiobook person, that's worth checking out too. So yeah, it's around. And then acting wise, I'm unfortunately I can't yet talk about the thing I'm working on at the moment. But there's if you're a Black Sails fan and want to see me returning to some kind of action adventure role, then yeah, follow me on social media and you'll hear something soon.
Right on. Go watch Black Sails again because that show was awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's always worth a rewatch. I'm
Hell
due,
yeah.
I think.
Biased, but fuck it. It's all
Yeah,
good.
yeah. No, it's weird. It's weird. I know it's probably not cool, but I'm such a fan of. I'm just such a fan of that show, and it's the
Yeah.
great thing when you're in an ensemble show as well, because it's not
Hmm.
like I'm in every scene. It's I get to like get these whole periods of the show, where I get to just watch other really talented people be amazing, and then every now and then you're like, oh, that's right, I'm in this too. I forgot, but yeah, there's enough bits without me to enjoy it without my own face there.
Well, for you. I mean, for everyone else, it's like, yeah, the parts with Luke in it are awesome too. So, you know.
Yeah, that's right. You get that. You might not, but it's sometimes it's funny. Like you do a lot of things, and we all often don't like hearing our own voice, and can
Hmm.
cringe at ourselves. And but there's something about that show that I just love so much. Can kind of get caught up in the whole thing and forget I was even a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it when it was coming out, and I've since met my wife, and we moved to Ecuador together, and I'm just like, I gotta rewatch it with her because like I really want her to see it because it's like one of those shows I was watching when I was living in Germany, and I'm just like, yeah, man, this is good. This is good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, enjoy the rewatch, and
Thank you, man.
yeah. But no, thanks very much. And yeah, this was great. Really appreciate it.